This may look like a normal house. It's got square walls and a traditional gable roof. But inside this wall system is something so strange you might have to see it to believe it. This is a strawbale house. It's built on a typical concrete foundation, using post and beam wood framing for the walls and a 2x10 wood-framed roof system, much like a barn is built. And then we stack straw bales, like bricks, all the way up the walls. In order to prevent the bales from rotting or molding, we isolate them from the concrete foundation, give them a good roof overhang, ventilate it properly, and plaster directly onto the bales to keep the water out of the straw in the first place. We're going to show you how we built this airtight, super insulated, rodent-proof house that won't mold and is 4 times more fire resistant than a conventional stick-framed home. Although it may seem counterintuitive, a straw bale house needs a wood frame. It's going to allow you a place to anchor your roof system to keep the bales dry. It's going to allow you a place to attach lath and plaster on the walls to keep out wind and rain and even rodents from getting in your wall. And a wood frame gives you a place to nail and secure windows and doors. And so therefore, framing is possibly the most critical step in building a straw bale house. And today, we're all about it. If you saw our last video, you know that we're building this straw bale house on a thermally isolated and heated concrete slab floor. We've got anchor bolts embedded in the concrete to hold down the wood framing into place. We install a 4x4 mud sill onto that anchor bolt and seal the joint with an EPDM gap-filling gasket to make the wall impenetrable to air leakage and moisture infiltration. To help reduce water intrusion and make our homes wheelchair accessible, we recess the concrete foundation 1.5 inches where the door threshold will rest and finish flush up to our floor on the inside. We run the 4x4 long and cut a couple of kerfs through the bottom of the sill so we can cut it out easily later without scratching the floor with a sawzall blade. Anchoring a 4x4 mud sill all the way around the perimeter of the exterior walls instead of 2x4s, gives us more surface area to nail or fasten our lath and plaster trim. The lath and plaster are critical in making the straw bale wall system breathable and super durable. We want to make sure that we've got plenty of nailing. We use 4x4s for posts. To save some cost on lumber, you could nail 2 2x4s together to make up a 4x4. What's not really going to work, though, is trying to use a 2x6 in a straw bale wall. A 2x6 is so wide that it gets in the way of the strings that hold the straw bale together, so that when you go to cut out or notch around each one of these posts, you could easily cut through the string and the bale would explode. So we use 2x4s to prevent that. We install a post at the edge of every window and at the edge of every door, and no more than about 6 to 8 feet in between each post. So we're going to go ahead and set all of our 4x4 posts, and then we're going to come back with a 2x4 top plate and nail it all the way around the perimeter. Right now what we're doing is we're working on bracing up each one of these corners so that before we tie the walls together, we know that each one of these corner posts is totally plumb in both directions. At the wall corners, we want our brace to go both ways to prevent it from moving while we frame the floor and walls above it. Here we use 2x6s to brace the top of the wall to the ground. We hammered in 2 3/4-inch foundation stakes into the ground and secure the bottom of the 2x6 with 2 screws. Then we put a level on the wall to make sure that it's plumb in the direction that we're bracing. You may have to push on it a little bit to get it just right. Then secure it to the top of the wall with 2 screws. Once we get the top plate all the way around, we'll be able to set up a string and do what we call lining the wall. So we're going to set up a string on the outside of the wall, set up with a block in between the string and the framing, so that we know we have a perfect 1.5 inches, the thickness of that block. And then we're going to move and plumb each post to get within 1.5 inches of that line. That way we know we have a straight wall system. Because once we start locking it in with interior walls and the floor framing above, there's no going back. So it's really important to go ahead and line your wall early on as soon as you get it framed up. Because the more framing you get on top of it, the harder it's going to be to push those walls in or pull them out. And that's about it. We're going to get back to it. Hopefully we get these interior walls done and start running our double 2x10 rim joist all around the perimeter on top of the double top plate once we get that in. Like typical conventional wood frame construction, we use a double top plate. That is a second 2x4 on top of the first 2x4 top plate. Where there is an intersection of an interior wall, we do the same thing as conventional construction and leave a channel or a space for a 2x4 that intersects perpendicular to that exterior wall to tie in our interior wall. We typically frame these walls on the floor to get them nice and straight and square, and then stand them up in place, securing them to the pockets or channels that we left in the double top plate for the perimeter wall. In the case of a straw bale house, instead of nailing our end stud all the way up to the exterior wall frame, we want to leave that last stud out to create room to fit a straw bale inside that space without having to wedge it in. Now that all the exterior walls are erected and braced and lined in a straight line, and we have all of our interior walls framed up, now it's time to frame a double 2x10 bond beam all the way around the top of that exterior wall. That's going to create a rigid system to tie our, in this case, we have a loft floor above the bedroom and bathroom. That's going to give us a place to tie in our floor joist system, and it's also going to create some rigidity and resistance to wind deflection on the vaulted side of this house. It's really important for us to run the floor joist system for the loft floor perpendicular to the ridge, so that the joists running from one exterior wall all the way to the opposite exterior wall serve to hold the top of that wall together from the weight of the roof, pushing those walls out. Once we have our floor joists run and blocked mid-span, we can install our 3/4 tongue and groove floor sheathing. In this case, we use an Advantech wood sheathing that's resistant to warping if it gets wet. On the opposite end of this house, we have a vaulted roof system. Now, because it's vaulted, we don't have a floor system that's going to hold those walls from falling apart. So we have to span that entire vaulted system with a structural ridge beam. And that is going to actually support the roof system in its entirety so that it doesn't sag and push the exterior walls on the lower end. Now, in order for us to frame up a 24-foot tall wall system on that gable end where it's vaulted without the straw bales falling down or getting super uneven and wobbly as we stack the bales up, we frame out another double 2x10 floor joist that's 18 inches out, the same thickness or width of a straw bale, and deck that with plywood to create a wind beam that's going to resist the wind load of wind pushing up against that tall gable wall. And it's also going to provide a place where we can stop our straw bales at 8 feet high and have a place above, or a place to stack the bales going from 9 feet all the way up to the peak at the ridge. This is going to allow a significant amount of structural integrity and give us a place to finish our bales, anchor our cabinets, and create a really flat wall system that's structurally sound. Now that we have our loft floor system in place and our 2x10 bond beam going around the entire perimeter, it's time to erect our 5 2x6 ridge post that's going to support the 2x12 structural ridge that goes across and over the loft floor and the double LVL beam that holds the weight of the vaulted roof section over the main living area. This post is like 22 feet tall, so we have to be really careful when we erect it. Now that we've got our ridge post in place, we can frame up our gable wall, the triangular shaped wall that's going to sit on top of the loft floor and go all the way up to support the ridge beam that spans over top of the loft floor. So here we are setting the 2x12 ridge and our 2x10 rafters. This goes really fast because we can get really easy measurements framing the gable wall on the floor, and all of our rafters are the exact same dimensions. Check out this video of Mike Heindel on site showing us how to use a rafter template to cut each one of these rafters the same exact dimension and save a ton of time getting the perfect roof with ease. Now the other gable wall is a different story. This is the gable wall that holds the ridge beam up to create this vaulted area over the kitchen, living, dining room. This one we have to frame on the floor, and we're gonna raise it up with a boom truck or a crane. The other option would be to frame it in place, but that's gonna be very difficult to get everything plumb and square. So I think it's gonna be easier for us in a controlled environment on a flat slab floor to frame this thing on the floor and pick it up with a boom truck and set it in place. So let's do it. So we bring in a boom truck, basically a crane, to erect the gable wall, the triangular wall. We have a 4x8 sheet of plywood to brace the top of this wall so that we can pick it up without the wall deflecting. Because there is no plywood sheathing on this wall system, this is a straw bale house. So there's as minimal amount of bracing as possible in the beginning. And then once we set that triangular gable wall, we plumb it up, brace it off, and then we can set our double LVL ridge beam. Now this is really exciting. Setting this beam is really going to get us moving forward fast. And this is going to support the structural ridge, the double LVL beam that's going to open up this whole vaulted kitchen, living, dining area. As soon as we set our ridge beam, we can finish stacking those 2x10 rafters and finish our roof. At this point, with all of our rafters stacked, it looks like we have a roof, but we're not quite done yet. We need to do a couple of things. We need to add barge rafters or outriggers that are going to support our 2-foot roof overhang. So our gable wall is actually dropped to accommodate for a 2x6 barge rafter. So it's 5.5 inches lower than the top of the 2x10 rafter plane. That way, that gable wall can support that outrigger and really make a strong roof overhang that's going to be resistant to tornado-forced winds. Okay, so we want to build a house that's pretty airtight, but that doesn't mold. So it's really important to allow moisture to escape. Instead of letting moisture accumulate in the walls or roof framing, we give the walls and a roof a place to breathe. As we frame each one of these outriggers or barge rafters, we notch a 1-inch groove and place a corrugated plastic vent strip to allow moisture to move up and out the walls and ventilate out the breathable ridge cap. The next thing that we need to do is install blocking between each one of our rafter tails. We do this in between the rafters at the wall line. This is called freeze blocking, and it really makes that roof diaphragm super rigid. This 2x6 blocking positioned at the top of the wall is going to keep the 2x10 rafters that are stacked on edge from rolling over and falling down. And we're leaving a space, a 1-inch space, that we're going to leave open so that moist air can travel from the soffit vent up through the roof space above our insulation, so that any moist air that rises through the house and gets up in our roof system has a way to evacuate in that top 1 inch of space and go out the ridge vent up top. This is a critical step that must be done during framing to make sure that humidity that accumulates in any roof system or any house can be evacuated so that it doesn't create mold or moisture issues. So on a normal house, we would go ahead and install our soffit and fascia, or our boxing, so that we can get all of our roofing on as soon as possible. Once we install our roof sheathing, we want to get this roof covered up and dried in so that we don't have issues with rain. For the case of the straw bale house, we're going to install our subfascia onto our barge rafters, and then we're going to install our subfascia along the drip line where our gutter is going to be. And then we're going to actually go ahead and install our 1x8 fiber cement trim board on the gable ends. We're not going to quite do this on the drip line because we need a place to directly screw in plastic that's going to drop down and cover our bale walls during construction. So right now we're framing up the entire house with the roof system included so that when we stack our straw bales, they do not get wet. We want a finished roof on this frame. Now that we've got all of our subfascia, blocking, and rafters installed, we're ready to install our roof sheathing. Like on any other normal high-performance home, we use a 7/16 inch solar board, aluminum-faced roof sheathing that's going to block 97% of the radiant heat gain from the sun right off the bat. Now it's critical, again, when you use this type of roof sheathing to use and leave a 1-inch airspace underneath that sheathing so that it can evacuate any moist air that gets into that system. But this is going to be a huge bang for your buck installing radiant barrier solar board sheathing. So we put the aluminum face down to reflect all of that heat. All right, so now that we got our roof framed up on this house, we can stack our straw bales and not worry about them getting wet. So that's going to be it for now. We're going to talk about all the preparations that we need to do to this frame to get ready for stacking straw bales on the next one. So make sure to subscribe to our channel so you can follow us as we build this entire straw bale house from start to finish. And hit that little bell icon to be notified about the next one. That's it for now, y'all. I hope to see you on the next one. Till then, peace out.